Welcome to the State of the Nation, and joining us today as we have a look ahead at the political landscape for 2025 is one of my favorite columnists, writes a regular piece on News 24 that must be compulsory reading for anybody who is interested in South Africa, because he writes the best pieces in the entire News 24, and that is Dr. Ebrahim Harvey. Ebrahim, welcome back to the State of the Nation. Good to have you.
Thanks, Mike. Compliments of the season.
You know, let's put it this way. Let's have a big look at the macro picture of 2025. You know, it's not an election year. We obviously had a tumultuous 2024. How does 2025 look to you politically?
Well, to respond to your question, there's a combination necessarily of elements that I think will probably define what will be the key political points of 2025. I think you're going to see, notwithstanding, the ANC is having its January 8th statement tomorrow in Khayelitsha in Cape Town. And it's very interesting where they're having it, Mike. It's only a 2,000-seater. Now, you know how the previous January 8 statements of the ANC, this is like, I couldn't believe it, that they chose the Khayelitsha Stadium that only seats 2,000. Maybe it's a reflection of how much the ANC has declined politically, that they're having it in Cape Town, that's fine, but in the Khayelitsha Stadium that only seats 2,000. But I predict the government of national unity, of which the chief constituents are the ANC and the DA. I think you're going to, and already you can see it's been rocky, the choppy waters, quite a turbulent 6-7 month existence of the GNU and the Bella Act and many things. I think really, and I don't want to at all unnecessarily sound like a prophet of doom. I've been very critical of the GNU, and so have many people been, if you're aware. Many people across the board have been very critical. It's important that you get this clear, Mike. As much as one needs to be optimistic about the future and hopeful, you can't project any positive future for this country when it's being dogged by so many serious problems. That would be, to my mind, a false optimism. It's got to be grounded in some realistic appraisal of the current conjuncture. So I'm worried about the GNU. I must tell you, seriously worried, and how it ended last year, and the Bella Act and many other things. And I'm very concerned with the MK party. If you look at the past week or so, further suspensions of key KZN executive guys, of the MK party. So already they're starting the new year on a very rocky note, And I foresee really, just like with the GNU, I foresee further problems with the MK party. And it's very interesting to see what's going to transpire, Mike, because there's a whole flux going on at the moment. People are entering the MK party, others are suspended. So what happens to the MK party, to my mind, is of even greater importance to the evident decline of the ANC and the deeply troubled GNU.
Explain
the MK party, yeah.
Explain to me why the MK's potential issues, the instability within MK, which has to be acknowledged. I mean, from inception, people have been fired, people have been parachuted in. It seems like decisions made almost on a whim. Why would that have an impact on what happens within the ANC and within the governance of South Africa?
Well, it will certainly have an impact on the MK itself, first and foremost. You must remember, this is a party that hit the road running with a dramatic success, third biggest party after the 29th May. So, it was looking very good, but deeply troubled from its origins, And I think really, I did a lot of pieces, Mike, on the MK party, doing analysis of it, critical analysis. It's a very opportunistic. If you look at the roots of the MK party and then Zuma being expelled by the ANC, I think it really was a vindictive reaction to how the ANC he perceived, how they treated him, etc. He was jailed in 2000, which led to those riots. I think Zuma's travails was a big motivating factor in the formation of MK. And then the other people, very troubled, deeply implicated people, of state capture when he was in office. And interestingly, coming from the very SOEs that were so deeply troubled and which he was so seriously implicated in, for example, ESCOM, Transnet, bringing in those same heavyweights into the MK party. I don't know what his political agenda was there, but I think it's a shot in the foot of Zuma to have done that. And already you can see there's a lot of problems, Mike. And what will happen is that it's going to affect not only the MK, it's also going to affect the Progressive Alliance that the MK and EFF belongs to. There's no way that you're going to keep what's happening in MK, the crisis and what all the problems from a spillover into the Progressive Alliance, and a very negative spillover, because it is the biggest component of the Progressive Alliance and then the EFF. So what happens to both the EFF and the MK party in that Progressive Alliance is going to determine the fate and future of that alliance, I believe. So to that extent, this is very deeply troubling things, not only for MK, but for the Progressive Alliance that they belong to also.
Because the Controversies party is starting to look, to me, if one just takes out the political standing positions of the particular parties, is looking almost identical to what happened with COPE. COPE came into the election in 2009 and got 9%, which at that point was significant because the ANC looked so strong prior to that. Became a significant player in the South African firmament, but was dogged with internal machinations, which didn't stop. There was problems at the top, there were problems at the middle, problems at the bottom, etc. And nowadays, they don't even have a seat in Parliament. And it's starting to look a lot like that. I know that initially there was a talk of a comparison between MK and COPE, and everybody shot that down. But the downfall looks similar.
No, I think you're wrong. There's a number of big, tangible, significant differences. That party got 9%, and then MK got 15%, I think. That's the first thing to note. Number two, the dynamics that gave rise to the birth of COPE after Mbeki was forced to resign is very different from the political conjuncture, crisis-ridden as it is at the moment in this country. It's very different stuff. There's a lot of different historical dynamics with 2009, 8 when Mbeki was forced to resign, COPE born, and then and what's happened this year, last year with the 29th. I don't think you can just easily draw straightforward parallels. I think it's a very different, and also you must remember in that 9% and 15%, there's a lot of things that have been happening. There were definite reasons why COPE declined, as is very clear from the literature. And I think leadership squabbles was a big thing. But I'll tell you, the thing that makes me deeply worried about MK, I don't know if you've seen, Mike, over the holiday season, now recently, further squabbles, if the media is to be believed, between Floyd Shavambu and the daughter of Zuma. So, about leadership issues or style and stuff like that. I don't know if I was on a holiday, but I seen something, to that effect. And I don't know if it was just a bit of nonsense or whether it reflected what has really been happening. But if it is true, it just tells you, together with the suspension of the KZN executive people of MK, that they're in for a deeply troubled 2025, and it may seriously undermine and compromise the prospects for the further growth of MK.
Now, let's go back to the Government of National Unity. There was some tensions for sure around the Bella Act, which now seems to be implemented. One doesn't really know what the state of play is or the state of mind of the various participants. But, that aside, we're kind of getting two pictures out of the Government of National Unity. One, and I'm talking about as a alliance. On the one hand, if you just take the Bella situation out of it, everything seems to be quite calm and everybody's getting down to work in one way or another. Do you think that there is genuine discord in the partners, especially the ANC and the DA?
Well, I think the most serious discord, to use the word you're using, I think is the Bella Act. And, if you ask me, Mike, I'm quite sympathetic to Helen Zille and the DA regarding the nature of their objections. And they suspected and they cited that the main reason that they were having problems with it, Zille spoke about it at length, was the fact that the final authority would not be with where it was before with the school governing bodies, but that the Department of Education would have the final say regarding those matters. Now, that's a deeply troubling and retrogressive step, I must tell you, to place those decisions in the hands of a bureaucracy and take it away from parents. School governing bodies were very vibrant and dynamic at many schools. They were critical. My daughter attended the Parktown Girls High. I seen it there and other places, and not only in those sort of upper middle class, but elsewhere. And also there is a definite, without a shadow of doubt, threat to the Afrikaans language. And I think it's deliberately mounted in that thing. And Zille also spoke about that. Why you think she spoke about that? Because the DA is an amalgamation of remnants of the old Nationalist Party, Afrikaans-based, and the Democratic Party. So that's why strategically a sensitivity to the Afrikaans, because they constitute a big part of the voter base, I think, of the DA. But really very serious problems I see in how the ANC is approaching this question of Afrikaans. And I think they're ignoring, besides the importance of language rights in the Constitution, Afrikaans included, what they're making a very serious mistake about, and they're going to lose even much more support in the Western Cape, is that Afrikaans is the language of the overwhelming majority of colored people. The colored working class from around 1850, you have this identity of colored, has never, if you think that the electorate has been returning the DA to power, you'll see a bigger loss for the ANC in the next year's local government elections if they persist with downgrading Afrikaans. There's an attack on Afrikaans. I am convinced about it when I look at it, when I also know the ANC and the African nationalism there, etc. I think they're going to lose even more votes in the Western Cape, where the colored working class, it's their language, it's not just the Boers, it's their language. So I've got serious concerns about that.
Yeah, I recently did an interview that has created a bit of a storm with Tony Yangeni, where we discussed the Bella Act, and I said, why don't you just come out with it and just say it's retribution? It's just purely, it's not done for any gain. Less than 5% of the schools are Afrikaans. The decision actually doesn't go to the Minister of Education, it goes to the Provincial Minister of Education, and we know how well those are run. So it's purely it's a thinly disguised attack, for our history. And these things have got a nasty habit of playing their way out because, yes, the Western Cape, as you point out, but it also has implications very much so in the Northern Cape, which I understand is not a from a population perspective, a massive market, but it's another province. And there's remnants in the Eastern Cape as well. So it's a very, very interesting tactic that I feel, because I've viewed the Bella Act, it's in two parts. A lot of it was necessary and good legislation. And then you've got these couple of points in there that are done just purely out of spite by the looks of things, and not to improve education at all. One of the disgusting stories of South Africa is in 2023, the state built one school in the whole calendar year. I'm dying to see what they did in 2024, but that's the real failing. And it leads into another one of these big legislative moves, and that is around NHI, where it looks like if one puts Bella together with NHI, together with expropriation of land, was done in an effort for the ANC to try and keep its majority in the last election. And now the election is over. There's going to be a similar problem with NHI, isn't there? And depending on how hard they push this one.
A massive problem. You know what? The ANC, I am confident, is going to have an even bigger headache and problem with implementation of NHI than with the Bella Act. Let me tell you, the engine of NHI, I did many critiques of the NHI correctly, I believe, Mark, and confidently I would defend it again. You see the NHI implementation, if you read that very carefully, that piece of legislation, then it's very clear that public hospitals ought to be the driving engine of the NHI. And the public hospital, look, you can see when the NHI Act was passed, it was for election purposes. You know how long it's been around. Why did they introduce it? Just, you see, the timing of the NHI was deliberately political ploy to win support, and still they lost the elections getting fought. So that should tell you something. But really, on a more serious note, Mike, public hospitals, if public hospitals are as heavily compromised, I mean, there are many public without food, medicines, go and see, except for Grootes, the only truly well-functioning public hospital in South Africa, Mike, listen to me, is Grootes. Every public hospital has collapsed to a lesser or greater extent. I mean, things like food, medicines, it's been a mess, and it's been coming for a couple of years. So the NHI Act, honestly, I think you're going to have very serious problems with the implementation of the NHI Act. I think maybe even bigger than what is going to, the ANC is going to face with the Bella thing. And just remember, there's a serious problem with what the DA has now agreed to with Ramaphosa to sign it into, and they said they will develop a regulatory framework to address the concerns of the DA. No. Well, we'll see how it goes, but I'll tell you one thing about regulatory frameworks. If you want to address fundamental policy issues and differences, don't think you're going to have an easy day with regulations. When you've got big policy, which is what informs this thing, it's policy issues around the school governing bodies, vis-a-vis the Department of Education, where they're national or provincial. The regulator, to seek recourse to a regulatory framework and to fashion it to address fundamental policy issues is not going to be easy also. So I'd like to see how they're going to proceed in dealing with these issues, in negotiating an appropriate regulatory framework which accommodates, I must stress, the concerns expressed by the DA. How they're going to do that and manage it, I would love to see, Mike.
Well, we would all love to see it. And on the point of the national health insurance, we were obviously in the build-up to the election following the polls particularly closely. And when the act was passed, in the polls, the ANC dropped 5% from 45 to 40 on the daily polls, which proved to be quite accurate. I had an occasion over the festive season to go to a very private clinic in the leafy suburbs of Johannesburg to see, and because of this work that I'm doing, 80% of the people in the casualty ward were not white. So this is not just, if the intention is just to, much like the Bella Act, if the question is retribution, be careful, because many of your own voters are going to those institutions as well. This isn't just
Yeah, but
an enclave for whites only.
yeah, but you must be very careful there, Mike. You must be very careful there, because I can tell you, the black people who are on private medical aids is a small percentage. The bulk of the people on private medical is in this country, and the economics and the wealth disparities will tell you it's white people. It's overwhelming. Just like what do you think?
That is not covered by fact, Ebrahim. Sorry, but anyway, only because South Africa's a numbers game, the white minority is now so insignificant numerically that none of these.
Are you suggesting, Mike, that there are more white people on private medical aids than black people? If you say yes, then I'll tell you that you taught me something and I need to research it, because I didn't.
I'm not suggesting. I'm saying there are more black people on medical aid than white people.
Then I've learned something.
Yeah, so that's a fact. It's interestingly enough, there's another whole point of discussion around statistics in South Africa. But in any case,
but it wouldn't matter in the final analysis, Mike.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter in the final analysis, even if the component of white people being on medical aid is bigger. You see, let me tell you something. And if you read my columns on the NHI, my critique, I'm completely in favor. I must tell you, however, I completely, without a shred of reluctance, support the overriding political objective of addressing the massive disparities in health, and I mean, where money determines often whether people live or die. So, and the best medical services are for people who are on medical aids, and the mass of people are forced to use these degraded, terrible public hospitals. I mean, you have to address that. You have to make health services available even to the poorest people and not deny them because they don't have money.
Well, more than 80% of our health facilities are run by the state. So
yeah, but that's why I say that's the crisis in
I'm saying the problem can't be with the minority, surely.
Yeah, no, it's with the state. It's what it has done to public hospitals. The state. Yeah. They appoint all these CEOs and the directors of public hospitals. You've seen what has happened to the Tembisa, the worst example of corruption of a public hospital. Look what they've looted. The Tembisa hospital is terrible, Mike. And don't think it's only Tembisa. It's happened in... So the ANC must take responsibility for the terrible state of public hospitals, which it doesn't realize it has shot itself in the foot by neglect of public hospitals, because you needed efficient and effective public hospitals to ride with the NHI.
It's with that in mind that I view the NHI as purely a distraction to try and say the problem is not us. The problem is those small number of private healthcare facilities. The same thing with Bella Act is the problem's not with us. It's a small number of Afrikaans schools. It's a deflection tactic which has gained currency in the progressive movements. Which brings me on to the point that I know that you've been very much sort of in the middle of, and you commented a lot, and that is the move by the SA Communist Party to contest elections on their own ticket.
Yeah.
In one form or another, this has been tested before, but what is your view on the success or not of the SACP now becoming a political entity of its own?
No. When you pose that question, it needs to be with a bit of more nuance. Let me explain, Mike. The SACP
I'm not known for my nuance.
Okay, you hear me. They did contest, but only one or two, municipalities before. But it's the first time, which is the political significance of this. It's a massive, major shift. They now intend to contest every municipality. Where they're going to get the personnel and resources, I don't know, because the membership of the SACP has been declining also over the past 5 to 10 years. But more importantly, Mike, is the fact that, really, I don't want to use too strong language, with Slovo's, 30th anniversary of his passing, coinciding. I mean, late last year, the SACP had a special Congress where they took a decision, to contest because the ANC lost so scandalously. Poor did they do in the May elections that I think they alienated many people in the SACP and decided to hell with it. Let's go out on our own, and just look at the timing of that decision and when the election results came out. But Mike, more importantly, let me tell you, it's my column. I'm now, as I'm speaking to you, finalizing my column, which is on Slovo, the 30th anniversary of his passing, and with the future of the SACP, notably with its election prospects, and you'll see it in next year. Next year is the 2026 local government, when they will have to implement, Mike, this decision to contest those elections, independently. So let us see, Mike, what's going to happen. But I'll tell you something. I think that the truth of you see, has been embellished. That's what they have done. They have embellished the facts of Joe Slovo. Great as he was, you must remember Joe Slovo is the first housing minister, Mike. He's the first housing minister in a post-apartheid South Africa. Go and look at how Joe Slovo departed from the housing provisions of the RDP itself. And yes, the RDP was fashioned by Kosatu in 1993. It was the virtual election manifesto of the ANC in the first 1994 Uhuru election. He departed. He went the way of the World Bank and consultants, and what did he do effectively was to commercialize and commodify the housing policy. That gave rise to what, Mike? To this cheap matchbox RDP houses. This is what happened. We have a big number, the media doesn't cover it. Maybe you should do a story on it. And a housing crisis today in this country is bigger than it ever was under apartheid, Mike. So you can't look at Slovo. You see, this is what the SACP is doing. I've been watching, in the radio, TV. There's lots to be said that's positive about Slovo. I mean, he was a delegate to the Congress of the People, 1995, ushered in the Freedom Charter, played a huge role, was a leading commander of MK. But there's also, you see, political legacy must be, you can't whitewash things, Mike. You can't want to, sing the praises and then conceal the weak points. And there are weak points. Joe Slovo has a checkered mixed bag legacy. You see, which most legacies are about. But what they've done is to try to cleanse the legacy of Slovo completely. They don't even refer. So you know what Patrick Bond did? You must see on this morning. I seen. I think it's on the debate. Yeah, on the debate list. And this organization in Cape Town, they've got this journal. They, in any way, Amandla is the journal. It's a Cape Town base. They pick up big time this morning on this the falsity of the celebrations of Joe Slovo, because what they repeat there, which is correct, it leaves completely out of account Slovo being the first housing minister and what happened and how that set the basis for the ANC's housing policy and the disaster you see. I mean, look what happened in the Joburg city, the buildings, the fires, and a whole lot of things that have happened in the inner city, which is a consequence directly of the housing policy of Slovo, which the ANC government inherited and perpetuated after his passing, and which the SACP is silent on, you see. And so Amandla magazine, the Patrick Bond and others on the left, outside of the ANC lines, have picked up on this, and they're riding with it correctly, and they're giving a lot of ventilation to that, Mike. So I'm just saying, the SACP has good reason to be proud of Slovo, but they also need to be more balanced in their appraisal of his legacy, Mike.
And when one talks about legacy, when one looks at the legacy of Blade and Zamandi, I presume they're silent on that as well, which all leads into the fact that they are going to contest elections.
No,
And
they absolutely, yeah.
and I can't see where they get significant support from. Because, they haven't been a communist party in years. There are other parties that tout themselves as communist party, the EFF, MK. They can't, open a sentence without calling everybody comrade and a luta continua, etc., etc. The point is that political space has been taken up. So I'm trying to work out where the political space is for the SACP. And it feels to me like they may be victims of, you're in a room full of people, there's 50 of you in the room, and you all agree because you're the last 50 members.
Yeah.
And it feels like the whole world loves you.
Yeah.
Do you see their support being somewhere that I don't see it?
No, I think while I'm also a bit doubtful of how effective their participation will be in the 2026 local government elections, going it on their own independently of the ANC. I think, there's a number of things that one has to take into account that will determine the prospects of the party's participation in elections. And I must tell you, in objective terms, it is very favorable. Objective terms, the biggest crisis, socio-economic crisis we've got today ever in this country, Mike, and there the petrol price went up, a cost of living, it's just the worst ever. So if you understand what the role of a communist party is, and the SACP has not even understood that, that is why the SACP, and they don't talk about that, the ANC and the people of the SACP who have been commemorating Slovo's passing, don't even mention it. The SACP, Mike, I studied this area, both my master's and PhD. They do not get involved in municipal service struggles in the townships. Like the EFF, they're not there. They're not there. You see, a communist party must not only involve itself in working class, it must give conscious leadership bravely to those struggles, Mike. And you see, they haven't been involved, in those struggles at all. Mike, I've just got a little problem. I didn't charge my thing sufficiently. And I see I'm getting notice here. Look, I think it may last for another 5-10 minutes, but I'm talking about the battery on this PC.
Yes.
But I think, but don't be surprised, although I said that, the ANC is losing so much support, Mike, that I'll tell you something. It was brave of the SACP, let me tell you, to take the decision that it took. How it's going to pan out, I don't know, but I'll tell you something, I won't be surprised if the SACP eats further into the electoral base of the ANC. Yes, takes a significant chunk of it's a downward road for the ANC. I don't see the ANC ever getting back to power. And to be honest with you, I don't even see the ANC retaining 40%. In the next local government or national, I see a steady decline of the ANC. This is what I see, Mike. So if that prognosis is correct and reliable, what does it mean? It means that the SACP itself could do relatively well, taking support from the ANC in the 2026 local government elections. I think it could work. It could happen, rather. It's a plausible expectation that could happen. And maybe they think that this is what their strategy will be. I don't know.
As we sort of run down the clock here, what about the other side of the ledger, Ebrahim? What about, the DA, the rump of the ANC, one would imagine the more sort of business-friendly side of the ANC. Do you see that side of the aisle growing at all in the future?
Well, there's a number of people in the leadership. The NEC has got made up of many things of the ANC, and there is that component. To be honest with you, a lot of people think that Ramaphosa stands at the helm of that faction. That's why they often say he's white monopoly capital's man, a lot of things, about his history. And there's a lot of truth in it. I don't want to use this platform to go into it. But there's conscious moves. I can tell you, the white-dominated finance sector, especially, I think they're very concerned about the GNU, and to serve their interests, they would like to see a success of the GNU. And, maybe, Mike, to a significant extent, it might be plausible, because, I'll tell you one thing. I have deep concerns, and I can explain it, I've done it in my columns, of a future government in this country which consists of the MK and the EFF. I pointed to some of the problems and contradictions of the 30th anniversary of the passing of Joe Slovo, which was held over the past few days by the SACP.
Yes.
I then turned to the MK, the crisis in the MK, and I said that, as a result of the fact that it made such formidable headway in the 29th May elections to become the third biggest party, despite the fact that there's been ongoing shenanigans, internal turmoil and legal wrangling, and up until now, we've seen last week the suspension of 3 members of the MK KZN executive. We don't know how the 2026 elections will go, but no doubt the ANC will enter those elections on the back foot.
Yes.
The 29th May elections is going to weigh formidably in the minds of the ANC contesting the 2020, given the fact of how poorly it performed in the 2024 national elections. But the big question is, though we have to see what's going to happen with the EFFs, because that's going to, all the parties, in fact, are looking at the 2026 local government elections as a pace setter, as a clear indicator of the relative political strengths of the contending political parties. Right. EFF, no doubt, you can see after Floyd Shivambu and all the ructions that have occurred there and the gravitation of leading figures of EFF to MK. This has now placed a huge value, can I say, on what happens to the MK going forward. And I said that this new year started off on a bad note, because it's the very note on which last year it ended, with so many acrimonious legal wrangles, etc., and after the suspensions. So, we don't know how it's going to go, and also how that internal turmoil and ructions in the MK is going to affect the progressive alliance of which it is, together with the EFF, the biggest parties. Those are open-ended questions, and I think it's part of the larger, huge political, because South Africa's got a massive political crisis, not only surrounding the ANC's loss of support and power in the 29th May elections, but also the drop and decline of the EFF, which was, a chief contender, and it surprised me that they did so poorly. And now lots of things have happened to the EFF subsequent to those election results, which will probably likely deepen the decline of the EFF, I think, going forward. So the big question really, I think, is 3 parties, 3 contending players in the 2025 local government elections. It's the ANC, whether it can reverse the deepening decline, political decline, evidenced mostly by the 29th May election results in which it lost power. The EFF, whether they will continue to decline because they've dropped about 1% in the 29th May election results. And then the big player on the political stage, certainly, no doubt, and despite the acrimonious legal wrangling, is the MK party headed by the former President Jacob Zuma. And, we have to see whether these is going to ongoing, because if it goes on, these legal internal wrangles and turmoil, as you can see again last week, I have no doubt at all that it's going to have a dampening and weakening effect on MK in this year, and it will tell most formidably, I think, in how well they do. In fact, I think they're going to have serious problems with the 2026 local government elections if the current turmoil and legal wrangles continues in MK.
And now looking on the other side of the equation, on the other side of the ledger, as it were, or the aisle, we've got the DA stroke rump of the ANC that, the free market side of the ANC, let's call it that. And a lot of people have said they are roughly the government of national unity. How do you see that shaping up? Because, it's been a relatively tough time for the DA as well. They've had the controversy around Bella. There's been question marks around them, and they haven't done particularly overly well in the by-elections, the subsequent by-elections, other than in its safe seats. What do you see happening on that side of the political table?
The political landscape. No, a very important question you've posed. This is the way I'll respond to it. You see, there's no doubt. If you think there are no factions, there are factions in the ANC, including in its highest structure, the NEC. And there's no doubt equally that Ramaphosa's faction, which, to all intents and purposes, and no matter what the media may speculate about or other people denounce that association, there is a big association with President Ramaphosa, and the business community. And I think, as I indicated earlier on, they were happy with the GNU because the Ramaphosa invited the DA and then other parties. And, as long as the ANC DA holds that GNU together, I think no doubt it will be in the interests of the business community. But I said too that it might go beyond just being in the interest of the business community. It might have positive ramifications because the alternative to a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, may be too ghastly to contemplate. And that is what the MK and EFF, and we don't know, don't be fooled and think that you're going to have a war-like situation between those two parties. I think it's possible, and there are some people who think that they should do that there should be an increasing rapprochement politically between the MK and the EFF, because politically and ideologically and programmatically, they don't differ much, So we don't know whether that will play itself out. I think Malema and somewhat Chavambu himself might move in that direction, as we approach the 2026 local government elections. But as far as the GNU is concerned, I think there is merit to the arguments that and it goes beyond the business community, because to avoid what might happen with very leading figures in this MK party, how it took root, how it happened, and Zuma's own, what agenda, let us put it so, in the formation of MK, because of how he feels he was ill-treated by the ANC, and this is Ramaphosa's ANC, and he wants to almost resuscitate the ANC. I think he's on a hiding to nothing. What at best he can hope for, this is an important point, Mike, is that he creates further disgruntlement and unhappiness in the ANC. This is Zuma with his orientation, not to resuscitate the ANC internally itself, but to get people to disgruntled elements to leave the ANC, and to throw in their lot with growing the MK party. This is what I think.
We've got a similar situation on the other side, don't we, Ebrahim? And that is that, if one sort of gets cynical for a minute, and that is politics is about power and power is about access to money. You've had a very cozy relationship between, for example, the DA and the Freedom Front for years. They've been happy to coalesce, work together, etc. Yeah. Now suddenly, we saw what happened in the city of Tshwane with Action SA. We saw what happened in Oudtshoorn with Freedom Front Plus. You're starting to see parties on the other side also sort of say, we are also fighting against irrelevance, because if the DA becomes the vanguard of the more sort of the voter on the right, that imperils their access to their own little trough, be it just jobs in that case, not necessarily corruption. Do you think that strengthens the DA's hand or weakens the DA's hand?
Yeah, but you must remember the DA consists of a combination of, historical foes, in fact. There's the white liberals and the white Afrikaner nationalists in the NP, HNP, etc. And they came together. I think it's an important moment, but I don't think there's such a fundamental antagonism between the likes of the Freedom Front Party and the DA. I think there's been moments of healthy tension between them, and it will continue. And I think, in fact, the DA's opposition to Bella and the whole question of the marginalization of Afrikaans language has to do with the pressure that's coming from those old NP supporters who moved over to the DA when it was formed in 2006, I recall. So, but you'll have a mixture of these tensions in the GNU. But let me tell you, there's one thing that has to be very clear: the GNU, in terms of its political weight, and especially the two big contending parties, the ANC and the DA, will continue to dominate the government of national unity. The other parties, are relatively small and minor parties. Not that they're insignificant, but the direction strategically of the GNU and holding it together during this growing crisis, I think is going to primarily reside with the ANC and the DA.
Okay, so I want to then, as we move towards a close here, Ebrahim, I'd like to ask you, 2025 is going to be a year of positioning because we don't really have, everybody looking towards 2026. So it makes things a little bit more difficult to discern perhaps in 2025. In your opinion, what are the markers that we should be looking out for? Things that happen that could have an influence on South Africa going forward. What are you going to be specifically looking out for in 2025?
Absolutely. The electoral prospects, the outcome of the 2026 local government election is going to be pivotally driven and influenced by what happens, which is difficult to say. A whole lot of politics is in flux and ferment in South Africa like never before. You can see what's happening at local government elections. What happens to the ANC itself? And don't forget, there's some aspect that you neglected perhaps to go into, which is, I think, is going to pose a formidable challenge to the stability of the ANC alliance with the SACP. This is following the decision of the SACP to contest the elections and a growing criticism from the very outset. You've seen the SACP coming out strongly against the ANC for forming this alliance with the GNU. It's still playing itself out, and a number of regions, like the key regions like Gauteng, Panyaza Lesotho, they are dead against the ANC's alliance with the DA in this GNU. And there's no doubt, maybe they haven't done much damage, but I can tell you, I think they're going to have their foot on the accelerator, and one of the biggest challenges the GNU is going to face is going to come not from the ANC itself per se. It's going to come from the SACP and COSATU's alliance with the ANC, and they're demanding an increased vote. And in fact, because they didn't get that, the SACP took the decision, and influenced also by the bad turnout for the ANC 29th of May to go it on its own. So I'm just saying a key and critical factor is going to be what the ANC itself does with this pressure that is mounting from the SACP and COSATU, that it is in an unholy alliance, they claim. I believe it's filled with a lot of contradictions. I pointed it out in my writings, that this alliance between the governing alliance, whatever coalition, whatever you're going to call it, between the ANC and the DA, they are up in arms. And if you think that they're going to de-accelerate this thing, I don't think so. I think that the momentum and pressure against the ANC is going to continue throughout 2025, and we have to see, whether it will become such a headache to the ANC that it starts questioning its presence and in this GNU and the very existence of the GNU. It's a huge flux and ferment of, excitedly so, of South African politics at the moment. It's bound to determine what happens in 2025 and particularly the outcome of the 2026 local government elections.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is a country in a state of flux, born in a state of flux, continues in a state of flux. And you better stay watching the State of the Nation, because we're going to follow every twist and turn. And yeah, we have heard from one of the best. So I'd like to raise a cup to Pace Car Rental for keeping us on the air. I'd like to thank Dr. Ebrahim Harvey. We will be calling on your wisdom again as the year plays itself out. And we want to thank everybody for joining us on the State of the Nation today. We hope you subscribe to the channel. We'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.